That video that you just saw is from Calgary, where people are peacefully sitting in, having their own picnics outside of restaurants that demand you give them paperwork and permission slips from government in order to patronize them. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Rudowski here of WeAreChange.org. I had a lot of videos to pick from for today, especially with a young girl who doesn't know China exists, using a mask on a microphone. There's also footage of Dr. Fauci saying it's too early to tell if you could see your loved ones for Christmas. And there's also this amazing footage of the premiere of Victoria in Australia getting a reality check from a reporter.
And frankly, seriously, I'm making a serious point. I don't know what half of them were protesting against. Well,
a lot of them.
Then, well, good on them. Except it's illegal.
Yep, in Australia, the right to peacefully protest, the right to free speech, the right to control your own body, the right to control where you could work, the right to medical privacy has all been taken away by heavy-handed jackboot thugs that assault people for the slightest infraction and literally show up at their homes for making social media posts. This as the world is becoming more discriminated and more segregated, not even just because of medical policies, but also because of the larger divide and conquer agenda being played against most of the citizenry, where we're finding out the Portland State University just hired 82 diversity officers, spending millions of dollars to make sure that students are separated away from each other based on the way that they were born. This, as of course many top universities in the United States, including Columbia University, have already had separate events and ceremonies specifically for people based on their superficial differences, and it looks like this trend is only going to be continuing. And as long as people are going to continue to be discriminated against, segregated for things that are outside of their control, we will be here calling it out as long as we still can. As of course we know, there have been a number of very big efforts to try to undermine a lot of people questioning the prevailing agenda and narrative. This channel has already been demonetized, but hey, we just started to work with companies that I personally like, I personally use, and one of them is Pro One water filters. They're the same Pure One water filters that we worked with a few years ago. I like them, I use them a lot, and whether it's housing units, small portable filters, gravity filters, you name it, they got it. The link is down in the description below, especially if you are not a fan of microplastics, heavy metals, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and other really nasty chemicals that of course end up in your drinking water. The United Kingdom just announced that they will be adding fluoride to their drinking water to, quote, fight tooth decay. So yeah, along with that, and also just supporting horrible water companies that give you leachy plastic little crap that you overpay for, that you have to carry into your house. It's ridiculous to do that. It's a lot easier to get a water filter. It saves you a lot of time, a lot of money. You don't incentivize a lot of bad corporations out there, and this is why I work with them and I personally use them, so check out the link down below if you are interested. Now, also, it's important to note here that there are some topics that we can't talk about here on this particular YouTube channel, especially when it comes to details surrounding the origin of the global sickness, the important role of a commonly available medicine and its astronomical impact in India, with the government there recently declaring that its most populated state is officially free of this sickness, mainly because of something that we can't talk about here. I've been doing a lot of research on this, and of course I will be releasing a video about this tomorrow, specifically on LukeUncensored.com. Now, I think one of the biggest stories, especially one of the stories that's being the most underreported right now, is the total, utter evisceration of personal liberties and freedoms for the people living in Australia. What's happening in that country is extremely important. and of course has huge significance and repercussions for the rest of the world, as of course many bureaucrats, many top-level politicians, and corporate heads are looking at Australia to really see how further they could push an agenda that directly benefits them. And one of the most astonishing things while looking at Australia is the fact of the large number of compliance of police officers implementing a lot of these absurd policies. And it definitely looks like the Australian politicians are definitely giving police officers a lot of new things to enforce, as there has just been a slurry of emergency laws implemented in that country that heavily punish people for what was usually everyday occurrences that were considered previously normal. The Australian government is expanding their scope right now, especially when it comes to individuals that it wants to subject to a procedure that might not be right for everyone, according to some medical professionals. As the Australian Victorian state just announced that a medical procedure will be mandatory for all athletes to take, along, of course, with 1.25 million authorized workers that need to have this medical procedure, 2 of them, by the end of November. These authorized workers are also, quote, high-performance spokespersons that, of course, are usually the healthiest individuals in our society. The Premier of Victoria also announced that people who don't take his own personal medical advice and do what he wants them to do, quote, don't deserve the freedom that, of course, he initially took away from them, in a very overt, aggressive message saying that you will take his medical advice, that he knows what's right for everyone's body, or else he will prevent you from being able to work and make a living for yourself. Now, the scope of this procedure is being expanded almost every single day, when, of course, just a few weeks ago, we heard that these similar mandates were just conspiracy theories, that it was absolutely ridiculous and absurd to think that the state, that governments would implement such mandates. And now the same mainstream media that told us how absurd it was is cheering on these mandates, as of course the scope is being brought into retail staff, faith leaders, and pretty much everyone in modern day society. Now, how will these passports work? Well, on a pretty much permission slip papers please system, which will be digitized and will help the state track, trace, and database every single movement, every single opinion, every single action that an individual takes. As of course, this will be implemented through their own app system, which of course, as we know, there's bigger aspirations to make it compliant with a Chinese social credit score system, as we previously detailed to you many times before. Now, to me, asking permission from the government, having to jump through government hoops to get a paper, to get permission to live life normally, is an absolute recipe for a disaster that is as ridiculous as it is tyrannical. Now, you're telling me if I want a haircut, if I want to go to the supermarket, if I want to go to the cinemas, if I want to go to the restaurant, I'm going to have to get permission to do this from the same people that run the DMV. The room for error here is grand, and the possibility of abuse of this system is absolutely astronomical. A lot of people know this. A lot of people see this as ridiculous. A lot of people have been protesting this, and by and large, especially in the Western media, the protests have been blacked out as police officers are literally implementing policies that will prevent people from seeing the true scope and the true numbers of these protests. Another way that this will be implemented will be just like Israel is implementing this, with, of course, their green passport system needing routine compliance every 6 months to another medical procedure, as, of course, this does not end with one procedure or a second procedure or a third procedure, but a continuous procedure until the government tells you so, as they keep creating new hoops you need to jump through to participate in society. There will be more hoops than this. It's ridiculous to think that these hoops will end, as these hoops are giving them more power and authority, which centralized governments absolutely love and they want more of. And I think there's a reason the U.S. government and the U.S. mainstream media is not denouncing what's happening in Australia and Israel, and I think that's mainly because they have the same plans for Americans. And that, to me, is absolutely unacceptable, as it is dangerous for personal freedoms, personal responsibility, and our God-given rights. And many people see this, including many prominent sports stars like Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors, who says that these mandates that have already been implemented in some cities in the United States, quote, go against everything America stands for. LeBron James even came out, says that he strongly agrees with that statement and sentiment, agreeing with, of course, their political ideological opponent, individuals like U.S. Senator Rand Paul, that just said that the current health policy being implemented by Biden's health secretary is, quote, arrogance coupled with an authoritarianism that is unseemingly and un-American. And I have to agree with him there, as a lot of these mandates are going to discriminate against people of color, predominantly blacks, in urban areas. These mandates that are being implemented in New York are creating historic healthcare staff shortages from nurses that most likely already have things like natural immunity. And the goal here should be to hire people with natural immunity to work right now in the healthcare profession, not fire them. Since if we actually look at the prevailing logic and the science here, this makes the most amount of sense to me and other medical professionals that are talking about this right now, since of course firing them only exacerbates the health problem in this country. It will prevent people from getting healthy. It will prevent people from getting proper medical coverage and help. And yet, this is not even questioned, but somehow celebrated by some elements of the U.S. mainstream media, which is absolutely ridiculous. California just announced the majority of public school children will have to take this medical procedure in order to participate with the public school system. As of course, Dianne Feinstein just introduced a bill that will require you to jump through government permissions in order to fly domestically here in the United States. Yes, Dianne Feinstein introduced legislation into the Senate. The lady breaking mask policies that she's calling for wants to put restrictions on you having the ability to fly in the United States. This, as of course many countries have in lockstep and barrel implemented similar measures, as Turkey just announced a very similar effort where people will need to show proof in order to fly domestically in Turkey or use the bus or use the train, that they will need to take a medical procedure and jump through a government hoop. Italy is also implementing similar policies. And it's almost as if there's a coordinated effort here with countries implementing the same exact tyrannical Orwellian policies that scientifically absolutely make zero sense, especially from a health policy, since, as we know, people who take this procedure can also transmit the sickness against. Again, the official story here just absolutely doesn't add up, according to my opinion. You want to explain it to me? Explain it to me down in the comment section below, because all of this, according to my own personal opinion, absolutely makes no sense at all unless you see it from the perspective of digitizing, locking in, and controlling populations. That, to me, is what's happening here, and if you agree, send this video out, send this message out to the larger general public, to your friends, family members, people in your neighborhood, people in your community. It's more important than ever to have real social currency. The times ahead are going to be very difficult, but they will be made a lot easier if you're able to prepare accordingly. I love you guys. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you just sharing that video. And if you like this video, click like. You disliked it, click the dislike button. But once again, love you guys. Stay tuned for a lot more here on wearechange.org.